Hi, everyone. Sherry Harris just took us live. I will be your cruise director and your host today. I'm going to give it 30 seconds for everybody who is joining to connect to audio and be able to hear us. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch us. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Haley Jones. I'm the president-elect of DAYL, and I'm a partner at Crawford, Wishnam, and Lang. I practice commercial litigation. I will be our moderator today. As a housekeeping matter, if you have a question, we want this discussion today to be collaborative. If you have a question, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to submit that question, and I will ask the panelists to cover as many as we can get to in our hour that we have allotted today. I want to introduce our panelists, and I'll go in the order that they're showing up on my screen. The first is Jennifer Ryback, who was the DAYL president in 2018. She has joined us today for this special event. She is a shareholder at McGuire, Craddock and Strother, where she practices commercial litigation, construction litigation, probate litigation, and employment law. Next, we have Justin Dion. Am I saying that right? It's Dion.
Sure. Whatever. Yeah.
Thank you,
good.
Justin. He'll tell us when I call on him, I'm sure. But this is Justin. Justin practiced law for many years and has now left the practice of law and is a licensed professional counselor. So he has a unique perspective to share with us today, and I think you'll enjoy hearing from him. And last but certainly not least is Nathan Williamson, who is the founder of the Nathan Williamson Law Firm, Nathan K. Williamson PLLC, where he practices personal injury law. I'm getting a little bit of feedback from one of you. I can't tell who it is. I think it's either Justin or Nathan. I think it was Nathan. Thanks, Nathan. So with that introduction, I'll call our first question. And the intention for this panel is for this to be an open discussion. So if there are questions that are triggered along the way that you all want to ask, please ask them. And we'll try to be less formal about this as we might otherwise be. The first question is, what causes anxiety in the practice of law for you? And we'll go ladies first. So Jennifer, we'll start with you on this question.
Okay, perfect. First of all, thanks for getting this group together, Haley, and putting the conversation together. I don't think this is a topic we can talk about too often, especially in our profession. And really after all that we've all been through over the course of the last few years, especially. So, for me, it's typically the trying to keep all of the things afloat, the practice, life at home. I have 3 small children and obviously a husband, PTA commitments, sports schedules, all of that. So usually my anxiety, although a lot comes from the day-to-day practice of law, I had an email pop up right as we were coming on from an opposing lawyer that made I could feel, the tension in my body as I saw it. So I certainly have those, daily things, like I know many of us do, but most of my anxiety tends to come from just trying to do all the things all the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are doing a lot of the things all the time. Justin, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, for me in particular, but I think for all of us, we've learned a lot from functional MRI machines in the last 5 years or so about the structure of brains. And it turns out that law school and the practice of law is like going to a gymnasium for anxiety. You're training yourself how to identify worst case scenarios. You're picking the least bad option, like with not a ton of information in really quick ways. We've got a lot of balls in the air, to Jennifer's point. We are grooving out the channels in our brain that make us predisposed to have like anxious responses in our body. We're just really, really good at it. And so like a lot of what we do reinforces, makes us really susceptible to that anxiety spilling over into other areas of our life. And that, that was going on for me for years before I even put my finger on it. So.
Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it. And that kind of leads me into our next question. So Nathan, I'll come to you with our first question and then let you kind of dovetail into our next question and kick us off. So our first question is, what causes anxiety in the practice of law? And then the next question, Nathan, is how is it manifested for you, and when and how did you first recognize it?
Yeah, I mean, as a solo small firm, you have a, you're basically relying on yourself. You're basically relying on yourself to generate the income, to keep the clients happy, to be, you're the attorney, you're the business owner, you're the accountant, you wear all these hats, and you're trying to, if you're married with kids, trying to maintain a family, maintain that work-life balance. So there's a lot of anxiety with that. There's a lot of stress of that. There's a lot of, oh my gosh, we're getting to, the middle of the month. When is the next, settlement going to happen? When is the next check going to come in? One of those things. So there's a lot of anxiety that comes from that. And I mean, how it's manifested. I think that for the most part, there's like a stigma of admitting that you have anxiety. You don't want to show any type of weakness. You don't want to show weakness to opposing counsel. You don't want to show weakness to, if you have employees, you don't want to show weakness to your any of your colleagues, bosses, coworkers, anything like that. Where it manifested more for me is just, I think that even more coming out of the pandemic and during that pandemic time, it's like a lot of anxiety of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to my practice? What am I going to do? How am I going to function? You're really, things shut down. I'm a personal injury lawyer. I am a proud car wreck attorney, and there were no cars on the road. And you ask yourself, there's no cars on the road. How am I getting cases? How am I going to continue my practice? And then beyond that, it's like, we came out of the pandemic and everybody was like, okay, back to work, go to the court, go to do this. There was a lot of anxiety for me specifically of just going out, just seeing people like, oh my gosh, I got to go to this meeting and there's going to be, let alone 5 people, but 10 people that I'm gonna have to interact with. I don't even know if I remember how to talk to people. So there's like just that, weirdness that comes that kind of happened for me. So that's where it, started and kind of some of the manifestations for me.
Yeah, that's really relatable to me. I during COVID, at some point, and it got worse over time, right? This stuff doesn't happen, I don't think, for any of us overnight. It starts somewhere and then it grows over time. And at some point you realize, wow, I think I have a problem. And it started for me during COVID too. And I realized I would go to sleep around 11 and I would sleep for about 2 hours, and I would be awake from every night from 1 a.m. to about 5 or 5:30. I would wake up in like fight or flight mode, not able to sleep. I would walk around my house, putz around, and take a nap and then go to work from home, obviously, but I would work all day, every day. And that was happening for me for like months. And that started during COVID. So, I relate to a lot of that, Nathan. Jennifer, let's come back to you. How does it manifest for you and how do you recognize it?
Yeah, I certainly experienced higher than normal anxiety levels during COVID, but I really think for me, it started much earlier than that. I shared on our, prep call for this when I had my first little one back in 2016. A lot of us, especially before you start a family, you're used to, you control your day. You control for the most part. I mean, things come up, client demands, et cetera, but for the most part, you set your schedule for the day and you can do all the things. When I had my first little one, it was the first time I really felt like I was out of control. You get up in the morning, or maybe you don't sleep well at night because they're up all night, right? And then, you have to wake up in the morning, full speed ahead, get to the office, get things done, et cetera. And I can remember sometimes, after my maternity leave and when I had come back to work full time, just kind of looking at my husband and going, I don't know how we're going to do this. Just candidly, I don't know how we're going to do this. And, during the course of those, first few months and really the first year, it was this battle of, outwardly we're doing all the things and we're getting everything done. But sometimes at home, it was, not the best environment in terms of our mental health and like struggling through and all of that. And I think, you know, we had to have some candid conversations about priorities and what, you know, what needed to take priority in that season of life, so that it didn't manifest in, you know, negative ways in terms of our mental and frankly, our physical health as well.
Thanks, Jennifer. So we just got our first question. I think this dovetails with what we had planned to talk about next. So what we plan to talk about next is, do you tell people you're struggling? And if so, how do you tell them? And what tips and strategies do you all recommend to our friends who are here with us today to do that? And the specific question that we got is, what do you do if your boss is causing the anxiety? So let's come over to our licensed professional counselor here on this one and see what tips he might have for us.
I mean, not to plug, but like therapy helps. No, it's tricky. Before we talked, we had a conversation about this when there's a lot of times the boundaries that you need to set and the safety you need to create for yourself comes from conversations with management above you. But one of your best sets of resources is your peer level groups, and even like folks around you, not in the legal field. We heal in connection. We build strength from connection. And that vulnerability is sometimes antithetical to our conceptualizations of success in this field. But figuring out how you can be authentic to yourself in that way, you can do both at the same time. You can there's strength in vulnerability. There's vulnerability in strength. Figuring out how to strike that balance and have those conversations and like own your stuff is super important. It's really hard to do it on your own with a self-help book or do it on your own in therapy. It takes connections outside of yourself.
Nathan, let's come to you next, because you've been really vulnerable in talking about some mental health issues, at least with this group. And so how do you tell people? How do you start that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult conversation to have, and I've always, you know, I've traditionally been someone that keeps everything inside, and the difficulty, and I think that that's one of the things that, you know, as attorneys, you know, even more that we just internalize things. That's just how life is. That's just the practice of law. That's just the stress of having, you know, multiple deadlines and things. And I finally got to the point, and it's a difficult point to get to, because we all are. I mean, I am self-conscious. I try to not say we all are, and I've learned to just say it's me, not everyone, but, you know, very self-conscious and very worried about what others perceive of me and the image that I have, and not wanting to tarnish that view of things. Or if somebody says, oh, he's a hard worker, he does this, he does that. And it's that fear, if I come to this person and I'm vulnerable, what would they look at me as, right? And it took just getting to the point to where I said, I can no longer act like, you know, I don't have these struggles or that I don't have these issues. And I had shared with the group that I'm a part of one night, you know, and I had always had, like I said earlier, just a lot of anxiety of going to different meetings, and was at a meeting and I was talking and, you know, active in this organization, and I, you know, share it. Like, you know, I think that we need to do more to help our fellow, you know, attorneys, and actually look at people and say that, you know, it's okay to say that I am not okay. Like, I am, you know, I'm dealing with a lot of things. I got a lot of things going on at work and a lot of things going on in life that creates that anxiety. And I've never, you know, never wanting to admit that, never wanting to show that weakness, because, you know, after I shared that, you know, one of my good friends that I had talked to beforehand, I didn't even tell him that I was going to say anything at the meeting about it, but he comes to me and he's like, you know, thank you for sharing that. But then you kind of hear the rumbling, oh, you know, I would never say that in front of a group of these people, because my referral sources may hear it, or they may not want to send me case. They may not want to do this. And it comes to a point to where we have to ask ourselves, what's more important? What's the most important thing to us? And at the end of the day, it has to be being there for our families, being there for ourselves and our clients, right? So what do we have to do that? And sometimes it's coming to someone and saying, you know, I am not okay. I'm dealing with these things, and talking to them. And I think that Justin touched on it. I won't, I'm an attorney, as we all are, so I can talk. I need this whole hour for my own personal word out to the people, but that you need a community beyond getting the counseling, beyond taking medication if you need to. If you talk to your doctor and they make that recommendation, not being afraid or ashamed to say, sometimes we deal with things and we need to make sure that we're at our best in those moments. But you need a community. You need people who you can actually, I was anxious about being on this Zoom. And then right before, when they said, we expect about 60, 70 people, I was like, oh my gosh, 60 or 70 people that I'm going to be sharing that I have anxiety with. And this is 60 people that'll tell, that whole thing that you kind of get to. But it's getting to just that point to say, it's okay with not being okay. And at the end of the day, you're the most important person in your personal world. So if you're not okay, you can't be okay for the others around you. So that's the important realization that I came to.
Yeah, I think that's right, Nathan. And that's the tagline for today, right? It's okay to not be okay. And a lot of us are not okay. And I think the way we have conversations can yield more meaningful results. To talk to some of the folks, and we got another question, more specifically, how do you tell your higher ups you need to start seeking help, like therapy, if you don't have a mentor you can turn to and tell? And so, I would give two pieces of advice that have helped for me, and they don't work for everybody, but they help for me. And piece of advice number one is I try to be consistent in my work and in showing up and in my hours and the way I maintain my schedule. So that they know, my partners know when they can reach me, and my clients know when they can reach me, and they know there are certain times, like in the evening, if I'm with family, that it's going to be harder to reach me. But if they can reach me during the times where I'm consistently available, that's less of a problem. And so I feel like being consistent in my schedule allows me to take some ownership and control over it. And then piece of advice number two is find people to work with who are going to treat you like a person. I left a big firm where they were great lawyers and they did treat me like a person. They were wonderful people. But the big firm politics were not the right environment for me. And I now work at a firm that has 11 attorneys, and the people, those other 10 lawyers that I work with, they know me personally. And so when I come to them and I say, and I don't do it all the time, but when it really is true and I really am struggling, I come to them and I say, I'm struggling, and they care and they make a team effort to take things off my plate. So those are just two things that have changed my life and have helped me. Jennifer, let's come over to you, because you're a partner. You work with younger attorneys and they have mental health issues like all of us. What advice do you have for younger attorneys who are looking for mentorship and trying to tell people that they need help but don't know how to do it?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on that point, Haley. And this initially goes more towards the first question, which was, what do you do if your boss is the one giving you anxiety? I think sometimes we internalize things, or we perceive that someone has expectations of us that they may not really. I'll give an example. When I was a young lawyer, I had one of the partners here that I love, and just a great guy. He would email at night. And say, let's do XYZ. I looked over this. I think the next step is this. And in my mind, that meant I had to be up at night and responding and those were his work hours. So they needed to be my work hours. Well, at some point that became untenable. And so I just had a conversation with him about it. And it turned out that was him just getting stuff out of his email inbox, right? It was him clearing his docket. So when he started the next day, he could deal with what he felt like he needed to deal with. He had absolutely no expectation that I would respond imminently to any of those emails. It was perfectly fine for him if it was a 1-2 business day turnaround on any of those things that he was getting out late at night. But for me, before I had that conversation, that was an expectation. I just assumed, oh my gosh, he's up. I need to be up. I got to be replying. So I would say, take a step back. If the things that are giving you anxiety from a boss or a superior that you're working with, is it really them, or is it you meeting an expectation that may not be there? I'll say that. And then I'll say, sometimes we also work with people who don't treat us very well. And sometimes it's not just you. Sometimes it really is truly the person is not a nice person, or they're, the work environment is not a healthy work environment. And it's our livelihood. And I don't say this lightly, but truly, if you're in a situation where that is the, climate, I think it might be time to look for something else. I think it's, initially it's, what are these expectations? Am I bringing this on myself, or is it real? Two, it's a real honest conversation with the person that, look, when you're doing these things, it's creating this result. I will perform better and I will do a better job for you if we can get on the same page. And I think if that conversation doesn't go well, if that person doesn't accept what you're saying about the work environment, then I think you might have to look somewhere else. And I think to the second question, Haley, about, this more of the mentorship question, where do you find somebody to tell and where do you find somebody to talk to? I think sometimes we think our mentors can only be our superiors, can only be the partners that we work with. I think it's important to find mentors who are outside of our firm that, sometimes you can't be as candid with someone internal as you can be with somebody external. I think it's important to have that group. And then, like Justin mentioned, really having a more parallel group of peers that you can talk to. Those are mentors too, really. I mean, we don't think of it that way if they're the same age or vintage as you from law school. Sometimes we don't think of them that way, but truly some of the people that I go to with these very real things that we all face in the practice are not at my firm. It's this group of, mostly women attorneys who I can just text and say, can you believe this opposing counsel did this? And talk about what do we do about it? Or like, hey, you need to step away. It's been a rough week. Let's go do this. So I think it's just having those systems and those groups in place because sometimes, you can't just get mentorship from one place, I think.
I think that's right, Jennifer. And DAYL is that for me. I have a group of friends in DAYL who go through the same things that I go through and who have a shared experience with me. And our board of directors, for instance, has a group chat. And, the things that get said in that group chat a lot of the time make me feel seen and heard. And just feeling that way a lot of the time helps me identify how I'm feeling and label it and communicate about it. So, to plug DAYL, we have networks here for you. Please get involved. Justin, I want to come to you because when we met to talk about this panel, you talked about how you made the decision to leave the practice of law and become a licensed professional counselor, and how you kind of weighed the pros and cons of that. And I thought that was really helpful. And I think we're at a point now where Jennifer and I have both said sometimes you need to look for a different environment. What prompted you to do that? And what prompted you to do that, I guess?
I still didn't have my finger on it the first few iterations of, and I made a couple of jumps inside the legal world, moving from litigation to a more corporate practice, moving then to something that was more in-house, more collaborative, less adversarial all the time. And there was just this, I started to be able to articulate it better and better as I went on. But for me, the inauthenticity that's inherent in advocacy just didn't work for me. Like I couldn't put that hat on and take it off. Like doing that in and of itself was spurring my feelings of anxiety. And so I just moved to the side to a helping profession where, that hat being on all the time, like you as you, is core to it. With however many people are on this call, if it's 60 people on this call, we have 60 different like primary sources of our anxiety. And so for some of us, like it's something core to the legal profession. To Jennifer's point from a minute ago, sometimes it's like one core relationship that's making us like deeply anxious. So and I went a decade before I could even put my finger on the beginning of that. And so there's no that's not even something you can unlock in therapy quickly necessarily. But just self-knowledge, like being honest with yourself, cutting through the BS. There's a lot of things we tell ourselves, a lot of messages that we internalize as we're going through law school, armor that we put on ourselves, skin that we toughen. And just like just being really transparent and vulnerable just with yourself is step one.
Mhm.
I'll tell you, I that speaks so directly to me because when I left Big Law, I felt so much shame about it. Like I had let some unidentified person down, or I was leaving some prestige behind that so many people want but never get the opportunity to pursue. And being in an environment that allows me to be more authentic to myself has unlocked a level of career satisfaction that I think people miss if they fight to stay in roles that are not right for them. And so thank you for sharing that, Justin. I totally agree. Nathan, let's come to you. And if you want to comment on any of the points that we've just raised, we'd love to hear your feedback. And then I'll let you kick us into the next point, which is how have people responded when you've told them that you're struggling with anxiety or mental health obstacles, and has it met, exceeded your expectations?
Yeah, well, I think to the question that was asked as far as what to do when you need to seek, you want to start going to therapy, or you don't necessarily have a mentor that you can turn to. I think it's also realizing that a lot of other people who may be on the same level as you are having the same issues, and not being afraid to have a conversation with your friend when you're going to lunch, when you're going to wherever you're going, if you're just interacting and saying that, and realizing that it doesn't necessarily have to be a mentor, but a friend who you can share that with, and then start talking about ways to do that. And I think then looking at saying, okay, well, you have to, I think that a lot of great points were raised as far as, changing your environment, but sometimes that's a stress and anxiety in and of itself. Like, how in the world can I leave a job that's paying me, when I started my own firm, it was kind of like, how can you leave a job paying you every 2 weeks where you're making good money, just go out and just try to do something on your own? But it was kind of coming to that realization that I couldn't continue to be in the environment that I was in, and I didn't like the person that I was becoming necessarily. But I'd say, doing that, and then sometimes, especially when you can't necessarily initially get the additional time, it's figuring out like, okay, is there a place that I can go to in the morning at 7 a.m.? Is there a place that I can go to at after work? And I know that that's adding more into it, but there's a lot of different, the one of the great things about technology now, there's a lot of other options to where you don't have to physically go into your, to seek therapy that you can do. There's different apps and things, and I say do your research on how good different things are and how good the counselors and the therapists that you may meet in those instances. But definitely doing that. And, you have to prioritize your health, just as much as you prioritize if you break your leg, you're going to go to the hospital, you're going to go and get some treatment. When you have a mental issue where you're having problems, prioritize that. Do not let it get out of hand, because I admittedly did not take it seriously at first. It was just power through it. It's almost what I did for a long time is I just poured some alcohol on it. It was, if you're feeling bad, just pour a little alcohol on it, get a couple drinks and you're good. But it's that's kind of the thing that we have to prioritize our mental health as much as we do our physical health. Transitioning into the other question of how people have reacted to it, it's been more positive than anything. I mean, people that I've shared my struggles and where I am kind of in my life and as I've gone, it's been positive. And if there's not a positive response, it's I will butcher the saying: the people that matter don't mind, and the people that don't matter don't matter. I don't. We spend too much time worrying about what those people think about us. But it's been an overall positive response. People that I have group chats and people that I can text before this and say, hey, I'm really feeling anxious about getting on this Zoom webinar. When I was asked to speak on this, like, oh my gosh, I don't want people to know this. And I, talked to someone and they said, do it. This is, I won't get spiritual or religious, but it's kind of one of those, your higher power is telling you something. If you're dealing with these things and you get the opportunity to express it and maybe help one person to, make that call to reach out to someone to deal with those issues, and it's beneficial. But like I said, most people respond positively to it because there's a lot more. I think it's underreported the number of people who actually deal with anxiety and a lot of the stress in our profession. And they want someone who's willing to be there for them as much as they're willing to be there for you.
Well, I appreciate that, Nathan, and I appreciate everyone's vulnerability in participating in this today. And to the audience, the thing that prompted this panel was the fact that we've lost 3 young lawyers in our DFW community within the last year to suicide. And so, as uncomfortable as it may be, if talking about these issues helps even one person who's considering taking their own life, then let's do it. It is uncomfortable, but it's important to DAYL, and I'm just grateful to the panelists who are here today who are sharing this with us. So, Jennifer, let's come back to you. How have people responded when you've told them at times that you're struggling with mental health?
So I actually have an example. I actually have a little story, and I love this story because I think the grace is out there for the most part. Like Nathan said, we're people first. And I think by and large, absent some, jerks, for lack of a term I probably shouldn't say, absent some jerks in our profession, we really are good people who are trying to do the right thing most of the time. At the height of the pandemic, part of my practice is employment law. And if you don't remember, we didn't know anything about what to do. There were new laws were getting passed. What does this mean? Who do I have to pay sick leave to? What's happening? Can I even have my business open? There were just questions flying at us from all directions. Clients needed answers quickly. They were trying to navigate, unemployment questions. And there was we all remember, it was a lot. And I have one client in particular who needed a lot of guidance in that season. And it was a rough time for everyone. But parents in that season, it was rough. The schools were closed, the daycares were closed. I had a 3-year-old and a 4-month-old at the time. And it was just one of those days. My husband had a conference call. And so I jumped in the car with both kids. And I didn't think I had anything on my schedule, for a good hour. So I'm like, I'm just going to jump in the car. Everybody's going to take a nap. We're going to get some, change of scenery and, out of the house and all of that. And so I had done that. This particular client called and I thought, okay, I can take the call. The kids are quiet. What could happen? Right. Well, as soon as I jumped on the phone with this client, the kids went crazy. The 4-month-old lost it. The 3-year-old lost it. I mean, it was crazy. And so I'm trying my best to hear the client's question, trying my best to articulate a somewhat, articulate answer. And she just stopped and she said, "I'm a grandmother." And I said, "Oh, I had no idea. I mean, we really had never, talked on that level." And she said, "Hang on just a second." And literally, she just started singing Itsy Bitsy Spider. And both kids quieted down. And it was just, one of the moments of the pandemic that I will remember forever, because she seriously needed to have this very serious conversation with me. But us as humans, she just pushed pause and she put her grandma hat on. And I will always remember her for that. She's the call I always take if I'm in the middle of something. She's the one who gets my attention first, because that was a very human moment. I, was struggling. It was a tough day, as a lot of those days were, trying to, figure out how to keep the peace in the house. And she just cut through all of that and just made it such a human moment. And so, I think a lot of times, we have these expectations. Again, I'm going to come back to this. I guess this is a theme for me. In my head, I have these expectations of what a client expects. And, I have high expectations for myself, for my work, for my communications with the client. But sometimes life happens, sometimes things like this happen. And I think, I don't think we need to burden our clients with our problems every day, right? I think, we're here mostly to do good work for them and, that sort of thing. But I think in some of these extreme situations, I think sometimes being vulnerable in a moment like that, where, look, I'm taking this call, but I have these crazy kids in the car. And so this is what it is. I think sometimes we'll be surprised at the reaction, and it's not going to be, well, call me back when you can talk, which is what that was the expectation in my mind as the children started, ramping up and up and up. I just expected, and not that she was a heinous person. I didn't have any reason to expect that she was going to react negatively, but in my head, it was, a failure, a lack of meeting expectations. So I think sometimes we need to take a breath and, in moments where, it's appropriate, I think being vulnerable and just saying either I can't do this right now, which is probably what I should have said when she called, or to just say, laugh and just say that this is the moment, I can't not be a mom right now. And this is the season. So I think sometimes, just being vulnerable. I'll add, though, caveat, it's no secret there are generational differences between us. Many of the partners at my firm, I say, okay, boomer, a good majority of the time around here. And such a great generation. I mean, their work ethic, so many things that, the generations before us have done well. One thing I think maybe they didn't do so well is I don't think there was a lot of candor around how hard this profession is, how difficult it is to do this and to have a family and to, be involved in your community and to do all of the things that we all want to do. I think, whether it was said or unsaid, I think the thought was, you just do it. We did it. You just do it, buck up and do it. Maybe you don't sleep tonight. Maybe you miss a soccer game, whatever. We just figure it out. So I think sometimes when we think about having these conversations with our, partners, with our, superiors, I think we need to be cognizant of the generational differences. And I think they should be cognizant too. I mean, I think there's growth on both ends. And as someone who, supervises younger lawyers, I, would welcome a conversation about how somebody is struggling, mental health. What can we do to ease the burdens that, may be impacting you for a season or longer term, if that's, what you're going through. I would just caution, and I give myself this caution. I think, we need to be sparing about how often we maybe, I don't want to say use these things as an excuse. I think it needs to be a real, what you're facing needs to be real to bring it up. You don't want to be the millennial or the Gen Z who cried wolf, right? I mean, it's, these are serious conversations. And so it's not, oh, I'm just having a rough day, so I'm going to blow this deadline and I'll tell them I was, suffering from anxiety or something. I think it's got to be, a real, actual issue that you're dealing with and something that, warrants that kind of conversation. But hopefully it's met with understanding and grace. And I certainly, the folks that I work with, I think that's what we tried to strike, that we have to do the work, right? We have to do the work. Somebody has to do the work. The things have to get done. But it doesn't always have to be at the detriment of our physical and mental health. And so I think, striking those balances. And I would say too, if it's a season where you really are, struggling with something, that's preventing you from getting something done, whether it be a short-term issue or a longer-term issue, I think the number one piece of advice I would give is to not wait to raise it. We're in a profession where deadlines matter. Clients could lose, claims if you miss a deadline. Clients, there are very real issues that we deal with. And so I think, if you're in a season where you're struggling with something that truly is preventing you from performing the job, I think you need to raise it, as soon as you can and as soon as you feel comfortable with it, just to make sure somebody else in the firm can pick up and get a task to completion, you know, before the client really suffers.
Yeah, that's good advice, Jennifer. And it's hard for younger attorneys to look forward at their calendar and say, I have these things coming up and I don't know how to handle them. I mean, that's a skill in and of itself. But I will tell you that every time I've done that, it's been met with, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for, telling us that you're feeling this way. And I've asked for help. How do I prioritize these things? And I've received it. My partner, my supervisor has said, do this first and then do that and then do the other thing. Or I have all of this going on with multiple people. And as long as you're at a place where the people respect each other, they'll say, okay, well, that thing's more time sensitive than my thing, and not do my thing because I think I'm more important. And so working in a collaborative team environment has helped me manage some of those issues so much. And those environments exist. They are harder to find, I think, but they exist. So I would encourage you all to not ever assume that the practice of law doesn't leave any room for a collaborative environment, because I think that premise is false. Justin, let me come to you, because Jennifer touched on something that we talked about when we were preparing for this, which is the generational differences, right? Between what are really people who are in senior management roles versus our youngest associates who are now Gen Z. Can you comment on that for us and some tips around communicating about these issues?
Yeah, I've got some bad news in the research, which is they are about as good at implementing change in themselves at all generations, not just the ones that are in leadership positions right now, but really bad at fundamentally changing the ways in which they view the world and communicate. They're about as good as like learning Outlook and how to scan things in PDF. Like, it's not, you're gonna have to do it for them over and over and over again. So the advice is, we have to take a leadership role. Like Jennifer was also saying, somebody's got to do the work, somebody's got to get it done, somebody's got to do the mental health work. And not just for yourself, but outward looking and for peers. I'm not, especially, and for a moment, like, I want to address men on the call a little bit more directly. It's most / all of us are not in a position where we can sing the itsy bitsy spider on the phone when somebody is like overwhelmed. I'm also not asking all of us to have conversations with peers about like, you seem anxious right now, is there anything I could do? That is almost always broadly overstepping professionally. You can ask, what do you need? Like, when you see something wrong, like a question like, what do you need, is such a table setting exercise. They can talk about what's actually going on for them or not. But what you're doing, even put your business hat back on, you're facilitating the organization getting its needs met. You are putting yourself in a leadership position for the future. You're just being there. And so keeping your eyes peeled, not just for yourself, but for others. I know it's one more thing on your plate, but can pay such tremendous dividends for like when you have needs in the future, when other people will trust you to come with their stuff in the future. Like, it's just it's so multiplicative so quickly. So yeah, and I've had that in the back of my head since somebody raised their hand 5 minutes in, which is like, what do we do with our managers and our superiors, and the crusty partner in the corner office for whom like suffering is the bar of success and still talks about it proudly. You're still working at his law firm, and you're still, when you're on his floor, you're playing by his rules. But that doesn't mean it needs to be on a mental health island. And that's an edge case. So like, I know it's tricky. I know it's distinctly unfun. But identifying and implementing other resources is everything at that point.
Thank you, Justin. It is hard to lead by example, but I find that when I treat people with compassion, they're more likely to treat me with compassion. If I treat people the way that they want to be treated, and it's so simple, they tend to respond that way. And it takes some time, but it is a disarming question when you say, how can I help? Or what's going on with you? And you ask it in a meaningful, well-intended way. I've always received authentic answers when I ask an authentic question from most people. Nathan, let's come to you. let's get to the big kahuna of it all, right? Which is, how do you manage it? How do you manage anxiety? What tips do you have? What's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you?
Yeah, what doesn't work is not talking about it and doing nothing and just hoping that it's going to go away at some point. And I think that for the longest time, people just say, okay, you're down, or you do have a lot of stuff going through, just power through it. Um, what works is, getting into therapy, talking with someone professionally about any of the issues and things that you're going through, and being open and honest and candid to, about what's happening with them, and also having a support system and group of individuals who you can talk to, that are willing to, share those things, that you can really say, hey, I'm struggling. Can we go and grab coffee, grab lunch, do whatever it is to just have that connection? Because I think that sometimes, especially solo and small firm attorneys, we can kind of lack connection. You can get hauled up in your office or in your room, and I think that that's one of the biggest things that, what I was saying coming out of the pandemic, is being so inside of myself to where I didn't, you kind of lose that connection with a lot of people. Even if you're meeting on Zoom, it's a lot different when you're in person with someone. It's a lot different when you're back in the office. It's a lot different when you're back in the courtroom and you're doing these different things. So doing that, and then listening to your doctor, and going in, getting physicals, if your yearly physical, getting checked up, checked out, and doing that. And if you're really seriously struggling and you're having issues, there is nothing wrong with taking medication if your doctor prescribes it to you. There's nothing wrong with admitting to them what you're dealing with. And if you get that prescription, because I am, I'm afraid of needles. That is one of my big thing, and I really don't like taking medication, right? I don't like doing any of those things. I just, power through things. But if you get to the point to where you need that, and your doctor's recommending that, do it. I mean, again, you have to realize what's more important. And again, the people who matter understand, and people who don't matter, so don't worry about those people. But other than that, I mean, I just say doing something. Doing nothing is no longer an option, and it shouldn't be an option for anyone.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate you sharing all that. And I'll share with everybody here. Since I found myself in that position in 2020 where I wasn't sleeping at all, I did that for a few months. And finally, I went to my doctor and said, I have insomnia. I can't sleep. I don't know what's wrong with me. And she put me on trazodone, which is a sedative that helps me sleep. But she also put me on Lexapro, which is used to treat anxiety. And I am such a better person for taking that medication. I am more rational. I feel more like myself than I did when I was at my rock bottom in 2020, where I wasn't sleeping. And when you're not sleeping, it's hard to make good decisions. And when you're not taking care of yourself, where you can't access the rational part of your brain, it's hard to be a good lawyer, right? And so for me, that was a turning point in my career, was recognizing that there were resources out there for me that I wasn't accessing or utilizing. And so at first I felt embarrassed about it. And now I will proudly tell everybody, I take Lexapro, and it's one of the best things that I've done. Justin, let's come to you next. What tips do you have to manage all of this?
Yeah, a couple of quick yes ands to those. For that first 5 or 10 years that I was talking about struggling, I was very intentionally not going on any kind of medication, because I didn't want to mess with my brain, because my brain was my livelihood, and like I trusted it like to do my job / with the dysfunction. And a lot like little kids with stimulant medication for hyperactive type ADHD. For the folks who need it, like, it calms them down, and for everybody else, it's a stimulant. Your brain will react to it in the ways that it needs. And if it's not right for you, like, your psychiatrist does this all the time with medication management. They'll be reaching out to you in the first week or two. How is this working? What do we need to change? Dosage, like medication class, whatever. Like, you should have a resource network on the medication side, just like you do for everything else. And to Nathan's point with protecting yourself in what we do, almost all of us in this field are really good about protecting our clients, both in terms of like safety in these settings, like being flexible so that you can take your therapy appointment in your office and like have it blocked as docket call or whatever. Like and how we paper the file for those of you that are using insurance. I've got pilots for whom any notations in the documentation of symptoms of anxiety or depression could get them fired. And so we're really good about knowing what our clients need, like keeping you safe. I would love the opportunity to disavow folks who are listening of fears that the system will like let them down in that way, because that stopped me from even starting my journey for a while, which I don't love. I'm sorry, what was the original question? Like what else did you want me to tee up?
Yeah, your tips for young lawyers who are trying to manage their anxiety.
Oh gosh. Like we've been doing it in little bits and pieces this whole time. Um, um, I was the worst at the time at meaningful self-awareness work. I was so used to organizing my life around other people's principles, keeping track of success on other people's scoreboards. And so fundamental, like taking a step back and figuring out who you are and what you need without somebody asking you. So all the other stuff we're talking about with boundaries and putting up your hand in communication and network building, yes, all of it. But like a little curiosity in like a really fundamental way. For our lawyers who are out in the field for 2, 3, 4 years, who have been in academia for, 20 technically, you're aware that you're navigating life for the first time. You're maybe out in your own place for the first time, paying bills for the first time. You're also like, your sense of self in professional and non-professional ways is untethered and unmoored for the first time. And so use it, right? Like use that as a time for self-discovery, and for challenging things that you think you know about yourself. Again, really hard to do when you have discovery due on Thursday. Like I get it. But to the extent, curiosity meaningfully and intentionally applied is just such a gift. So try it, see what happens.
Thank you, Justin. Jennifer, let's come to you. We've got about 5 minutes left, and so I'll give you the closing remarks.
Well, thank you. I agree completely with what Nathan and Justin both said in terms of coping. And, there is a lot of stigma in our profession around needing help, needing counseling, needing medication, needing, whatever it is. I think that self-reflection is incredibly important. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. If you are not okay, that's the bottom line. And so I think that's, the message I hope we can all convey is, if you're struggling with something like this, pick up the phone, talk to a friend, get it, find a good counselor that you trust and can talk through these things with. One of the things, this is a tactical thing. When I find myself in a spiral where I'm, anxious about something or giving something too much life, I try to step back and ask, will this matter in a week? Will this matter in a month? Will this matter in a year? And most of the time, there are truly things that will matter, right? Most of the time, I find my wheels spinning about things that don't matter. Really and truly, like I said, there are things that, if I really blow something, I could lose my license. Sure. There are things like that really matter. The majority of the time, it falls in the category of, in a week, I won't even remember this. And so I try to take a deep breath and step back and think of it in that light, because, we're a lot of us, I know not everyone here is a litigator. A lot of us are, and we tend to, we can make an issue where there's not an issue a lot of the times. The other thing I will say, Haley mentioned, this is this program really came to life because there have been several instances of suicide in our community. I want to say to everybody that's on the call, panelists included, you matter. You matter. So whatever it is that you're struggling with, somebody would miss you if you were gone. So just going to make myself cry, you know, hormones and everything postpartum. You matter. You have a mom or a dad or a child or a wife or a husband or a best friend or a fill in the blank. And as isolating as it can be, sometimes when you're dealing with all of those things, you matter. You have people that would miss you.
Okay, well, now I'm crying too.
Sorry.
Thank you, Jennifer. Come to our social, guys, get involved in DAYL. We are a huge resource. You're not alone. I hope that you see that. So we have a social on Thursday. It's at My Little Butterfingers at 6 o'clock. I will be there in a purple jacket, wearing a name tag that says Haley Jones. If we haven't met, come up to me. I want to be your friend. Thank you for joining us. You are entitled to 1 hour of ethics credit. Sherry Harris, I believe, posted the course number. So if you were here today with us, be sure to get your ethics credit. And thank you for joining. Thank you to our panelists for your completely vulnerable, authentic, and willingness to discuss these really important issues today. Thanks, guys. I'll see y'all soon.